بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على من بعث رحمة للعالمين. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، حييكم عباد الله بتحية الجنة، سلام الله عليكم ورحمته وبركاته. وجعل الآخرة والفردوس مثواي ومثواكم اللهم آمين. After praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending peace and blessings upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I would like to express my gratitude to all of you first for sticking around, and I hope that I don't disappoint you. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the same way that He has united us here in this dunya, in His mosque and in His home, that He also unites us under His shade on a day where there will only be the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For the little youngsters, quick message, please. If you're on your phone first, I don't think it's befitting for you to be at the masjid with your phone. I think we should probably have a talk with your father. You're at the masjid, you shouldn't be Facebooking, you shouldn't be Instagramming, you definitely should not be doing the duck poses, all right? Okay, so what we will, the brother asked for, he asked me to introduce myself. I'm not sure how I can do that. My name is Youssef Soussi. I'm willing or can or ready to say is that I'm a da'i out of the Minneapolis area, Minneapolis, Minnesota area. I'm a rotating khatib, I give lectures, I'm a husband of 3 kids, a very good husband, of course. Yeah, I can say that since she's not here, right? But I don't like, so what we'll be talking about, inshallah, that is something, I will say it's going to be different. It's unusual. And I don't say this to boast of myself or to give the idea that I'm bringing something very, very new and something, super duper extra different. But it is definitely going to be different than the typical muhadarat or the typical lectures that we hear oftentimes online. And so what we will be discussing, the unwan is how we can tie what is happening, tie what we're going to talk about tonight, inshallah ta'ala, with what is happening in Gaza. But it's not necessarily going to speak about each and every Gaza of the Prophet ﷺ. That can be found, obviously, in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. However, I'm here to talk about how Islam is a middle path. How Islam is a middle path. And Islam is a middle path, not in one facet, not in one avenue, not on one stream. Islam is a middle path in everything. Right? Islam is a middle path in everything. And that's why, for example, you find the Prophet ﷺ, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying in Surah Al-Baqarah, what does he say? He says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Right? It is by that we have made you into a middle nation. Right? And you can perhaps even make the claim that Islam is a middle nation between the extreme religion of Judaism, right, where they have their ahkam of the Torah, they're extremely rigid and extremely difficult to follow. Or you can also say that it is a middle path between the lax religion of Christianity, where all you have to do is to have iman in your heart, you have to believe that Jesus died for your sins. It's not about do's and don'ts and so on and so forth, right? But Islam is a middle path between the two. We also find, brothers and sisters, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانَ, and to establish the weight with justice and do not destroy the balance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put. I would like to share with you some of the examples that I have noticed over, I would say, the past decade, where there's a lot of excessive, where there's an excessive focus. And when I say excessive, I mean excessive, right? There's an excessive focus on one end while completely being detached or forgetting the opposite end. In my humble observation, I've observed the 10 following things, especially in pop culture and in da'wah. One is that we preach much on Allah's mercy, but rarely do we talk about the wrath and the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the excruciating pain in hell that awaits those who defy, who are defiant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His commandments. I'm sure all of you will agree on that. Number two, we preach much on the gentleness of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, we rarely talk about his boldness and we rarely talk about his courage. Number three, we preach much to men about lowering their gaze, but rarely do we mention to women on how they ought to be modest and dress appropriately when they leave their homes. Number four, we preach much on the adab of giving advice, but rarely do we talk about how to accept it. These are just things I've noticed over the past decade that I find at least happening online and also in our Muslim discourse. Number five, we preach much on how men ought to treat their wives, but rarely do we talk to women and how they should obey, respect, and honor their husbands, right? And of course, it's very obvious as to why this is happening, but we'll get into that in a little bit, inshallah ta'ala. Number seven, we preach much on the harms of anger, but rarely do we talk about the healthy aspects and the healthy angle of anger, right? There's a healthy anger for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's a bad anger, which I call prophetic anger versus pathetic anger. Number eight, we preach much on toxic masculinity. We preach much on toxic masculinity, but rarely, and it is an impossibility to ever hear a lecture about toxic femininity. Yes, it is a thing, it's prevalent, it exists, and it's unfortunately growing and spreading like wildfire out there. Number nine, we preach much on how Musa was to be gentle with Fir'aun, but rarely do we talk about how he later condemns him and he makes dua against him, as is found in Surah Yunus and also in Surah Al-Isra. The last one, we preach much on the harlot who is forgiven, but rarely do we talk about these narrations as they are the exceptions and they're not the rule. Okay? So these are just the 10 things that at least I see happening in American dawah. And I'll be very frank with you, brothers and sisters. North America has it very, very bad in comparison with Canada, in comparison with, the UK, and in comparison with what is happening in Australia. So these are the things that I mentioned. Number two, I think that is also worth mentioning, brothers and sisters, is that when you live in a dominant society and you're the minority, it is almost impossible to realize when it's happening. In other words, you find yourself picking up, you're doing things that are part of everyday normal society, but you don't even realize that you've adopted it, that you've incorporated it in your life, right? And as one of the Shaikh, I like what he said, you're free. Your body is free. You can go wherever you want. But are you really intellectually, your cognitive abilities, your psychology, right? Is it really free, or is your body free, but your mind and your brain and your desires and the way you view life, and the way everything is formed in front of you, are you truly free as well? Or is that also colonized without even realizing it, right? And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ told us hundreds of years ago, right? What does he say? He says that تَتَّبِعُنَّ سَنَنَ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ شِبْرًا بِشِبْرٍ ذِرَاعًا بِذِرَاعٍ حَتَّى وَلَوْ دَخَلُوا جُحْرَ ضَبٍّ دَخَلْتُمُوهُ. The Prophet says that you will follow the people, right? But he doesn't specify here, at least at the beginning. He said that you will follow those who went before, right? Span by span, cubit by cubit. Even that if they went into the hole of the lizard, right? You will follow them in that hole. In other words, it's not about the good or the bad. And the Muslim, by his nature, we always, you always take the good of that society and you leave the bad. So for example, when we're back home, we have a problem with being on time. I think all of us, right? You say 7 o'clock, but they're at 7:15, 7:30. Doesn't apologize, then doesn't give you a heads up notice. It's not an issue, right? But you get to America and you know that American life doesn't really work like that. It doesn't operate like that, right? This is something that we can incorporate, but this is something that we can change. However, we find ourselves, the Prophet ﷺ, after that, he said, when he's done with the hadith of the companions, they said, are you talking about the Jews and the Christians? He said, yes. Who else, Ilan? Who else am I referring to? Okay. How does this affect us? SubhanAllah, I think it's very, very obvious for those of you who have Christian friends and you're kind of familiar with the way of life here in America, is that Christianity, the bedrock of Christianity today that's spread in and around the world, I think is about love and mercy. It's about love, loving God with all your heart, and being good to your neighbors, right? Loving your neighbors like yourself. That's basically that's what Christianity is all about, right? But Christianity wasn't always like that. There was a balance in the church until very, very recent, right? Where the church could no longer keep up. So all they could speak about is love, forgiving God's mercy, tolerance, kindness, forgiving the other. Jesus now, he loves sinners, and Jesus is having breakfast with sinners, and he's having lunch with sinners, and he's having dinner with sinners, and so on and so forth. We Muslims are following in that footstep. We, as Muslim du'at, imams and mashayikh, are literally following right in that footstep. And that's why it is rare, it's very rare, that you're going to come to Prophetic Justice, with the exception of our Shaikh here, I'm just saying in general. It's very rare that you're going to find a Shaikh or an Imam talk to you about Allah's wrath, as I said earlier, about His punishment, about the excruciating pain in hell, right? That awaits people who are rebellious, people who are defiant, and people who are disobedient. However, what you will find week after week, and it doesn't help because when you go online, you find the same exact thing. A lot of these Muslim public figures, a lot of these public pages, this is what you're going to constantly find. And then you're going to find someone who's so cinematic when they do these videos. But Allah, whatever you do, and there's the machine in the background, and you're drooling right here. Oh, this was so moving. This is what we've become. But we don't realize. To the point now, if we talk about that, do you know who will accuse you of being extreme? Your own Muslim brothers and sisters will accuse you as a speaker of being extreme, in pushing people away from the message, and being too aggressive. Why? For simply reminding those there of Allah's wrath, anger, and punishment. People no longer want to hear that message. But there has to be somewhat of a balance, right? Because some people in the ummah, the more you talk to them about Allah's love and mercy, the more defiant they become. Am I exaggerating, or is this true? It's true. Some people, the more you talk to them about Allah's love, mercy, and forgiveness, the more defiant they become. It doesn't create a sense of urgency. They go to the masjid, that's all they hear. They're online, that's all they hear. They're on Twitter, that's all they hear. They go to Facebook, that's all they hear. They bounce to Instagram, that's all they hear. It's a good bubbly feeling that you get, regardless of what, and that's no different than the message that's being spread or propagated by Christianity. Everything revolves around, oh, God doesn't judge anybody, God accepts you as you are, and so on and so forth. And this is why you get Muslims today who don't pray, they have no care for prayer, or the sister might not wear hijab, she doesn't pray, she doesn't care about what Islam has to say. But when you tell her sister this is haram, the first thing that she will rebuttal you with is, but brother, Allah's most gracious, most merciful, why are you guys so extreme? And I'm telling you, this is what you see out there. So Muslims have become somewhat like the Christians. They don't really do what Allah commanded them to do. They don't stay away from what Allah told them to stay away from, but they will immediately counter their rebuttals with, but Allah's most gracious, Allah's most merciful. I remember just 2 days ago, there was a video by Brother Muhammad Hijab, where he talked about, if you're not praying 5 times a day, what are you doing with your time? If you do not have the time to pray 5 times a day, what are you doing with your day? The second comment on there, I think we're all guilty. We all like to look at the comments. We scroll through the comments, and we're really, the video is irrelevant. You just want to see what people have to say about the video, right? I think we're all guilty. You guys have the internet in Olympia? You do. Okay, I just want to see if you're awake or not. So, when we go back to that, there was a person, you know what he wrote? He said, oh, Brother Muhammad Hijab, you're so extreme. Allah's most gracious, most merciful. Do you know why that Muslim got there? Why do you guys think that a Muslim who doesn't pray 5 times a day, but he's appealing to Allah being the most gracious, the most merciful, why do you think he is like that? No.
That's what he's here.
Say that again?
That's what he's here.
That's what he's been hearing for so long. The Muslim popular dawah culture in America, this is what it's selling. It's as if we now, Muslim du'ats and mashaykh, we have to kind of entertain people. Don't talk about that, brother. It's going to make people feel bad. Don't talk about accountability. Don't talk about responsibility. Tell everybody they're the victim and they'll come back again. This is kind of what we've become. And again, it's not about being cynical. We have to see what the problem is so we can overcome it, right? But again, this is what Christianity is all about. Right? And that's why you'll find Muslims today who will go around and say, but Allah loves everybody. Wait, rewind. Allah loves everyone. Where do you get this from? Again, this is incorporated, it's borrowed from Christianity. And Jesus doesn't love everybody. Allah doesn't love everybody. The same way that Allah doesn't hate everybody. But this concept of Allah loves everyone, this is a Christian concept. It's not a Muslim concept. Right? But this is why you got Muslims today like this. And when you remind them of Allah, when you remind them of Allah, when you remind them of the ahkam, it's difficult for them to take in. Because they're counting completely on what? Oh, but Allah's going to forgive me. And as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't help when everywhere they look, they're reminded of the woman, the harlot woman, the prostitute who went down to the well. She got water for the animal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saw what she did. So you have the average Muslim. She doesn't pray. She doesn't wear hijab. She dresses inappropriately. She's walking around doing whatever she's doing. And then you tell her something. She says, brother, do you not know the hadith of the woman who went down and she fed the animal and Allah forgave her sins? Do you see what people are banking on? Now, if we were to balance things and talk to people about Allah's wrath and punishments this month, and then after that we talk to them about human psychology, this is what we need. And this is the message of the Quran. If you look at the Quran, when Allah talks about hell, He talks about heaven. When He talks about punishment, He talks about pleasure. Right? As Allah says in the Quran, He says, وَاللَّهُ نَزَّلَ أَحْسَنَ الْحَدِيثِ كِتَابًا مُتَشَابِهًا مَثَانِيَ تَقْشَعِرُّ مِنْهُ جُلُودُ الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُم. That it's kitab mathani. That it happens, right? It kind of goes back and forth. Now, this also, I think, brothers and sisters, this leads us to the soft Muslim. And I would even argue to say what's commonly referred to today as the emasculated Muslim man, right? Where Muslims today are afraid to show any signs of honor and dignity because they're afraid that that is going to translate or that is going to register with the opposite people, that Muslims are extreme and that Muslims are violent, they're heartless, they're devoid of any rahmah, they're devoid of any love, compassion, or mercy. So that's why it's very hard for the young Muslim man today, and can I be honest, I was speaking with a brother not too long ago. He said, we're talking about these things. He looked at me, he says, well, I'm not going to lie. He said, we were not raised to be men. Young college student in his 30s. We're talking about these things. He said, the way we were raised, he says, we weren't raised to be men. Okay? Where do you get the soft Muslim from? Do you know where you get the soft Muslim from? What contributes to the soft Muslim today, who doesn't have a stance, who's afraid of being different, who's afraid of going against the sisters at the MSA, who just wants to fit in, right? He just wants to be the cool guy. He doesn't want anybody pointing the finger at him. Do you know where this comes from? This comes from the oftentimes repeated Khatib, Imam, or Shaykh, who's constantly focused on the Prophet ﷺ forgiving Fulal and Alam and so on and so forth, right? We constantly, when we talk about the Prophet, what do we talk about? We talk about how he forgave this person and that person, right? How he turned and he says, oh yeah, Umar zidhu. Oh yeah, Umar increased him and give him what he wanted. Or the man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and he pulled him by his garment so much so that it left a trace on his neck, right? So you as a Muslim, yes, it's true. It's true. There is a time where Islam requires of you to be forgiven. Where Islam requires of you to look the other way. Not to make a big deal out of it. That requires a great deal of restraint, discipline, and maturity, without a doubt. However, I'm afraid that sometimes Muslim men, and even, can I say, Muslim husbands, are being bullied, walked on, disrespected, and trampled, and they're constantly convincing themselves, I just have to wait, and I have to forgive. It's the sunnah. It's not always prophetic to forgive. I said it, I'm not trying to be controversial. No, it is not always prophetic to forgive. Sometimes it's not about forgiving. Sometimes it's not turning the other cheek. Again, that's Christianity, right? Where it says simply turn the other cheek, that's Christianity, right? Now, the Prophet ﷺ, I think all of us agree, undoubtedly, that he was the best of Allah's creation. He was the best of Bani Bashar. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about him, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ, right? خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. We have all these ayats that no one is here to contest or to deny that the Prophet ﷺ was the best in terms of his what? Of his conduct. However, I want to go through a few things that will, inshallah ta'ala, help you maybe give some guidance. Because again, too much of something can be disastrous, right? Because here's the thing, brothers and sisters. When you look at Islam and how it is, and how it's teaching you to be a father, how it's teaching you to be a husband, how it's teaching you to be the defender of the family, how it's teaching you to be a teacher, how it's teaching you to be a good neighbor and a good friend, I'm afraid that if we constantly bombard the Muslim psyche with one side and one narrow version of everything, I think the Muslims, they get a skewed picture and they don't get the full picture in front of them. Right? It's like you're looking on this side and they're telling you this is a full building, not realizing that there's a whole other side that you're not seeing. Right? So for example, the Prophet ﷺ, we're constantly taught that the Prophet ﷺ, when it came to changing munkar, that we have to do it in such a nice way, that we have to remind the people how amazing they are, and we have to smile, and we have to pick the right time. And I know some of you are like, where are you going with this? There's nothing wrong with that. However, if you look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, there are instances in the seerah where it is far away from that. Okay? And by the way, for those of you raising kids, if you find yourself being this person, I think we have to do some maybe reevaluation. Before, it was easy for parents to talk to their children to do things. Today, because of all these books and psychologists and therapists and everybody has their 2 cents to add, we start reading these books. And instead of just telling our child, do A, get off of B, we have to think for an hour. What's the best way to address that? No, I don't want to hurt his feelings. Hold on. Maybe I should, no, maybe when he gets, let him finish this and then I'll approach him. You know what, maybe tomorrow's a better time. Our parents did not used to do this. But notice how you will never look at your parents in the eye, but look at how your children are disobedient and defiant with you. So the more you open that bubble, the more disrespectful, unfortunately, a lot of these children become. You'll never dare look at your parents in the eye. You'll never challenge what your father said. Now, I'm not saying, I know there's probably a lot of trauma going on. Your parents never told you that they love you. They never hugged you. They never told you that they're proud of you. I get it. The problem, though, sometimes is we go from one extreme to the other extreme. My parents never loved me, so now I'm going to tell my child every 5 seconds, you love them. And you're going to ask them regarding everything. And you're never going to discipline them. And you're never going to yell at them. This is an extreme, but this is also an extreme. You shouldn't have to worry about telling your son to take out the garbage. You don't have to think about that. Or to tell him to go to his room. There shouldn't be any niqash going back and forth on that, right? Why am I talking about that? I don't know. Forgive me. Okay. What do you oftentimes hear? What is probably, I would argue, the most popular story of the seerah? Is it not how the Prophet ﷺ forgave the man going into the masjid and urinated in the masjid? Is this not like one of the most popular stories of the seerah? And this is what? This is to display the Prophet's forgiveness, right? I think we're on the same page. Okay. Today, when you're talking online, or you're talking about something, or you're forbidden evil, every Muslim will come at you with this story and say, but be gentle. The Prophet, ﷺ, he forgave the man. Listen, wallahi, if one of you today came and urinated in the masjid, no one is going to deal with you nicely. And no one should deal with you nicely. You know why? Because you know better. Do you really all think, Shaikh, what's your name? Shaikh, what's your name? Omar, Shaikh Omar. Anta al-Khatib, right? Assalamu alaikum. I saw some of your videos, that's why. Allah. We're rewarding the lesson. I mean, wallahi, if someone today in this congregation came and urinated in the masjid, do you think someone's going to say, stop, let him finish? No, I'm not trying to be funny. Do you all think that we're going to say, oh, stop, guys, let him finish? What's going to happen? So what's happening is Muslims, unfortunately, we're taking certain texts. This cap, where does this cap belong? Does it belong on top of my phone? On top of my kufi, or does it belong on top of the bottom? On top of the bottom. What we're doing today is we're taking random hadith that have absolutely nothing to do, completely out of context. What we're doing, instead of the cap, putting it here, we're saying, look at me. We're putting it, this is what This is what we're doing. And that's why there's a lie that some of the scholars they say a text without a context is a proof text. A text without a context is a pretext for a proof text. I know that sounds confusing, but when you don't put things in the right place, you get a distortion. Okay? Now the Prophet ﷺ, yes, but now why did the Prophet ﷺ tell everybody to hold your horses? Let him finish his urination. Because the key word is in the hadith itself. بال أعرابي في المسجد. Was it Abu Bakr who did it? Was it Umar? Was it the first Muhajirin? No, it wasn't. Who was it? An Arabi. An Arabi who did not know better. He thought it was normal to come to the corner of the masjid and to urinate. So that's why the Prophet says, stop. Now, do you guys think the Prophet would have dealt differently with them if one of those the bigger Sahabas of the Muhajirin did that? And they would never do that. But just hypothetically speaking, do you think one of them would never do it? But assuming that one of them did do it, do you think the Prophet's reaction would be different? Yes. Again, this is all hypothetical, okay? The problem is you have goofballs today in the Muslim Ummah who are negatively influencing your children, your children, your children, your children, and my children online. The minute you speak up, someone comes at you with this hadith. Brother, be nice to him. He's destroying our daughters. He or she is destroying our sons. But we have to treat them like the Prophet treated that person in the masjid. Things don't work like that. Okay? How many of you are familiar with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where there was a man who had on a gold ring? Again, a gold ring. The Prophet, as soon as he saw that, he pulled him to the side. He said, don't you know, brother, that it's only women who wear gold. Please, kindly take it off and make tawbah to Allah. I got news for everybody. That's not what happened. But you know what you know about the Prophet. You would think that that's exactly what happened. The Prophet ﷺ, he yanked the ring out of his hands and he threw it on the ground. And you know what he said? He says, do one of you rely on a piece of coal of the hellfire? In other words, for men wearing gold? The Prophet later on, can I ask this by raise of hands? How many of you are hearing this hadith for the first time? That's bad. That's really, really bad. And it's not that you should be embarrassed. It's our job, not yours. It's our job as the Mashaykh to shed light on this hadith. Because it's for a reason that happened. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he threw it. When they left, he says, خُذْهُ وَانْتَفِعْ بِهِ. The Prophet ﷺ later on told him, take your ring and go benefit with it. Benefit meaning here, go sell it, go do something with it. Right? But the Prophet ﷺ, he doesn't. Now, why do you all think the Prophet ﷺ dealt with him this way?
Make him an example. To make him an example.
Possibly. Any other?
It's haram to wear rings.
Let's go on. Yeah?
It's haram to wear gold rings.
Yes. As to why the Prophet ﷺ dealt with him that way, right now, it's irrelevant. Because we don't have any corroborated external evidence proven or showing us why the Prophet ﷺ. But suffice it to know that that the Prophet ﷺ did not deal with him in a soft way. Meaning that in Islam, there is a time for shiddah. There is a time in Islam to be rough and tough. There is a time in Islam to be rough and tough. When that time is and where and how you go about it, that's the $1 million question. But I think we have to stop conveying to the average Muslim that the Prophet ﷺ, at every turn, he came and he sat down and he had an hour-long discussion with them and he reminded them of how amazing they are. And then he said, I want to tell you something, but I hope I don't hurt your feelings. This is how the Prophet did not do this. The Prophet ﷺ did not do this at every turn. This is so difficult, right? Now, even when it comes to the Prophet ﷺ, when it comes to the munkar, right? The Prophet ﷺ, when she stole. How many of you are familiar with this story? When the Mar'a from Bani Makhzum, when she stole, but she was of the elite. And when she found out that her hand, that they were going to establish the hudud against her, everybody, got agitated. They said, what? What do you mean? She's of the elite. She's of the ashraf. She's not a typical tribe, right? She's of the noble tribe. We can't just cut her. We can't establish the hudud on her. What happens later on? They said, why don't you all send Zayd ibn Harith, right? Hibbu Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, now he finds Zayd in front of him. He's trying to intercede on behalf of this woman. Now the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, well, how does he deal with Zayd? How many of you know the story? How does he deal with Zayd? Yes, the Prophet ﷺ, he doesn't have a long conversation with Zayd. He doesn't say, yeah, bunay, it's not me. These are the hudud of Allah. We have to be this. We have to know. There's no nothing in it for us. The Prophet doesn't do that. He got angry, and rightfully so. It's justified anger. He says, لو سرق. No, first he says, أتشفع في حد من حدود. It was Usama, sorry. Usama ibn Zayd ibn Harith. He says, Ya Usama, أتشفع في حد من حدود الله. Usama, are you trying to intercede on behalf of one of Allah's hudud? Meaning there's nothing in it for us. This is Allah who legislated this. But does he sit there and have this long back and forth, long exchange with Usama about why he was wrong to do what he did? Ajibu. Was he firm and stern with him? Yes. So in Islam, there is a place and time and again for being firm and stern without some knucklehead coming to you telling you, oh, you're not doing it the prophetic way, brother. Because this is what we become, right? We have to be extra soft. We have to write a speech before giving a nasiha. Just to say something is haram today, you have to write this long speech before delivering it to the person. We've overcomplicated things. So the Prophet ﷺ, when it comes to him changing the munkar, he was different. Okay, number 2. When it comes to his forgiveness, there are 2 separate occasions where you see the Prophet ﷺ dealt with forgiving one person one way, and he dealt with a person in a completely different way. Hamza, when his own uncle was killed, that was extremely difficult on the Prophet ﷺ. It was very weighty on him, right? When Wahshi killed him in Ghazwat Uhud, Wahshi later on accepted Islam. The Prophet ﷺ, when he came to him, he said, Ya Wahshi, in istata'ta an la ara wajhaka faqat. He says, oh Wahshi, if it can be that I don't see your face, please let that be. If it's possible, oh Wahshi, that I don't see your face, please let that be. That's preferred. Now the Prophet ﷺ, and again, this is where discipline and maturity comes into play. So he doesn't say, I don't accept your Islam, Allah's never going to accept your Tawbah. He never says that. However, he does say, if I cannot see your face, please let that be. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, and please, I implore all of us, we have to stop portraying Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as though he was a robot and that he was wired with a certain لا. قل سبحان ربي هل كنت إلا بشر رسول. قل سبحان ربي هل كنت إلا بشر رسول. وما منع الناس أن يؤمنوا بجاءهم بالهدى إلا أن قالوا أبعث الله بشر رسولا. He was a human being. Why am I bringing this up? Because some people will give you the idea that we as Muslims, it's our job to forget and forgive, and this is the prophetic way to do it. I saw a video. You know what? I'm not sure if he's of this community or not. When I saw that, I had mixed feelings, because that's not something I would do. Not because I have a hard heart, not because I'm difficult, not because I'm aggressive. It has nothing to do with that. Sometimes you really wonder, is it a matter of us not having any honor and dignity for ourselves that we're so thirsty to show the kuffar? You can run all over us. We're going to stand up and say, but I'm still a peaceful person. Run me over again. No, we have to stop this. 30 years ago, I can understand that, but I think it's long overdue, right? So the person ended up killing his son, and it made the news, and it made the headlines. He hugged. It's commendable. It's commendable, right? It's not easy to do that. When the man got up in court and he hugged his son's killer. You guys know that. You guys saw that, right? Listen, he did that good for him. But don't come at me telling me that that's the prophetic way. Stop that. Don't come at me telling me that that's the prophetic way. It's okay that if your son dies, you don't have to stand up and walk over to your son's killer and give him a huge hug and say, I forgive you because Islam is about love and forgiveness. No, for what? You don't have to do that. And it doesn't mean that you're heartless. It means you're a human being, and it's okay that you do not do that. If you do it, that's fine. But if you don't do it, it's also fine, because you're a human being. Does this make sense? Because people respond that, MashaAllah, man, I have mixed feelings, I'm not going to lie. If someone's killing my son, I'm not going to walk over to you and tell you, hey, I forgive you. It's not me. I'm not going to do it. I don't think it's warranted. Now the Prophet ﷺ made this very clear because his uncle meant a lot to him. He said, if it is okay, I do not want to see your face. Now is someone going to say that the Prophet ﷺ is heartless and he lacks love and mercy and wisdom? No. But there's a place and time for everything. Now when it comes to forgiving certain people, the Prophet ﷺ in Ghazwat al-Fath, the one thing that we know about this ghazwa, or not, I can't really call it a ghazwa, maybe we'll say that it was the conquest for Fath Mecca. When the Prophet ﷺ was walking in, there was no battle, there was no war. He did indeed tell them, he says, go away, leave for there, you are free, right? And then he says, the one thing that Youssef said to his brothers, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم يغفر الله لكم وهو أرحم الراحمين. No blame is to be on you, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most gracious, most merciful. In Fath Mecca though, there were 4 people whom the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam made sure. He says, لو وجدتموهم معلقين في أستار الكعبة فاقتلوهم. He said that if you all find these 4, even if they're hanging on the Kaaba, kill them. Who knows the 4? باستثناء الإمام, with the exception of Shaikh. Ya Jama'at, I know Kobe Bryant, and I know the stats, and I know the rebounds, and I know this player, and Caruso, and Irvin, and I think he's the best ball handler, by the way. Dude's got skills like real talk. Anyway, that's regular for discussion. We'll talk about basketball tomorrow. Who are the 4? Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, Abdullah ibn Khattab, Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh, and then I forget the last one, Ibn Sibab. Yeah. These 4, the Prophet ﷺ said that if you find them, even if they are hanging on the Kaaba, is to kill them. So there isn't, what I'm getting at here, I don't want to paint a gloomy, grim picture. I want you all to know that there's something called justice in Islam. There is something called justice in Islam. I know we're eager, especially after 9/11, we're eager to show the Western world that, hey, no, we're not evil. We're not aggressive. We're not the transgressors. We're full of love, and we believe in community cohesion and coexistence. But okay, it gets to a time where we have to kind of balance things out a bit. Now, Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh, just to show you that there is something called justice in Islam. Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh was the one. He was the brother of Uthman ibn Affan min al-Radha. So Uthman ibn Affan took Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh and he hid him away. After things calmed down a bit, Uthman ibn Affan brings Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh in front of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And for those of you who are not familiar with this character, with the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, he used to write the wahi before with the Prophet. But he committed apostasy and then he made tawbah and came back. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as Uthman is telling him, O Messenger of Allah, he came back. The Prophet was silent. He was silent for a while until the Prophet ﷺ accepted his repentance. But the Prophet remained quiet for a while for a reason. He didn't want to accept his repentance. Might sound weird, right? But this is the truth. Again, because there's something called justice in Islam. Let's not forget that. As Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh walked out, the Prophet ﷺ told the companions around, He said, do you all not understand or realize why I was silent for that long period? He says, was there not a man among you to simply kill him? أَلَيْسَ فِيكُمْ رَجُلٌ يَضْرِبُ عُنُقًا? They said, O Messenger of Allah, هَلَّا أَوْمَأْتَ إِلَيْنَا? O Messenger of Allah, why didn't you just, like we would say, like wink at me? You know, like, he says it is not befitting for a messenger to behave in such a manner. Al-Mawt min al-Shahid is that the Prophet ﷺ, when he saw him, did he hurtle? Did he rush to give him a hug and say, welcome back? Did he tell him we all make mistakes? No. Does that mean the Prophet ﷺ doesn't have a full love and someone we're going to judge us? No. The point of all of this again is that to realize that for us Muslims, is that we have went so far on one extreme that we have to bring things back to the middle line again. Number 3, the Prophet ﷺ, the husband. Feminists, or femissima is a Muslim feminist, whatever that means. Yeah. When someone says a Muslim feminist, you're kind of like, what do you mean by that? Right? I'm a human alien, or what do you mean? I'm a Muslim feminist. Yeah. Not from Mars. So when we talk about the husband, the way feminists depict Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they depict him in such a way that he was just there, he admired them from afar, and he let them do whatever they want to do, and he never enjoyed good, he never forbade evil, he was never loud, he was never firm, he was never, he was just very passive, oh please, everything. Y'all, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. And I feel like oftentimes this is used by feminists to tame their men. To make you feel like, oh, you too have to be like the Prophet ﷺ. In one hadith, there were these photos, if you will, these depictions on a curtain wall. They were forms of animals, shapes of animals. Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, رَأَيْتُ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ وَفِي وَجْهِهِ الْقَضَاءُ. I saw the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and I could see anger on his face. She says the Prophet walked in and he saw that. And he reprimanded her for having that. And then he told her about the punishment that awaits those who draw his animals. She says the Prophet ﷺ took the curtain and he ripped it. How many of you guys get those magazines from Victoria's Secret? Just like on tape. You guys get any of those? You guys have Victoria's Secret as well? You guys get where I'm going with this? Now, if I were to ask you how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with Aisha, do you know what he would say? I'm sure he sat her down and he said, Aisha, you're amazing. I love you. I know this was probably a mistake. You didn't need to do this. No, he doesn't do that. Which is not to say that he reacted like this at every turn. But what I am telling you as a husband, sometimes it is okay for you to react this way. It shouldn't be an everyday occurrence for sure, because that would make you out to be flat out rude and disrespectful. But there are certain times where it is your salahiyya, if you will, salahiyya, for you to behave this way. So the Prophet ﷺ, he simply goes to the curtain and he cuts it in pieces. He was angry. But why was he angry, by the way? As a husband. Why? He was angry because it had to do with the hurumat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was afraid that the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were transgressed. Out of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why he reacted that way. Now, what are we taught? When we hear feminists talking about the Prophet, what do you guys usually hear? Oh, they were looking at the Abyssinians, they were playing around. You guys saw that video, right? I'm sure all of you saw it, right? Where Aisha radiallahu anha, she had her head on the Prophet's shoulder, and the Prophet ﷺ would say, okay, did you get enough? And she would say no, and so he would keep her like that. Or the Prophet ﷺ, when they would eat meat, the Prophet ﷺ, she would eat from one place, and the Prophet would take the meat, and he would eat from the same place, or that she would drink from the water, from the cup, and he would turn it around to where she drank from. And now, listen, I'm not here to teach you to be rude or to be disrespectful. This is not what I'm here for tonight. What I'm here for tonight is for us to remove this superficial lens that we have about our religion. That you have to be this perfect robot, and if you don't, then you have to go see an anger management therapist, and oh my God, and you have to go really get things checked. This is kind of what I'm here for, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he was the most befitting husband. Yes, we agree with that. He was nice, he was courteous, he was loving, right? He was romantic. Yes, he was all of it. But that doesn't necessarily mean now that you, as a man, when you look at these lectures, that now you become a doormat. And your wife walks all over you, and she tramples over you. And the minute you say something, no one listens to you because you have no weight in the house. This is an extreme as well. You're the man of the house. You have to be obeyed, respected, and honored as the man of the house. And this is what feminism is not willing to teach their followers, their adherents, call it whatever you want to call it. It's not cool. And this is why, again, you'll never hear it's rare, not here. Let's not say here. That's why it's rare. Hop on Google right now. Go on YouTube and look up a lecture that talks about a woman's obedience to her husband. See how many you come up with. You'll be lucky if you have 2 out of millions of videos out there. However, look on there, Google, or type in women's rights or how women are treated in Islam. You're going to find millions of videos. You know why? Because it is culturally popular to talk about these subjects. Who the hell does he think he is? Why do I have to honor him and respect him? This is the language we hear, right? In one instance, the Prophet ﷺ, he leaves, he's sleeping with Aisha radiallahu anha, so he gently sneaks out of the house, right? He leaves and he goes to visit his companions in Maqbarat al-Baqi. Aisha radiallahu anha, she gets a little bit jealous, right? So she walks out, she's tippy-toeing. So she gets close to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet feels there's someone behind him following him, right? He looks back, and then he sees just Sawa, like the shape of black. He doesn't know who it is, what it is, what's going on, right? So he's looking. So she's perturbed. She's like, okay, do I run back? Do I not? So she starts to hurry. He starts to hurry. She starts to jog. He's running after her. She gets in the house. When I say, by the way, guys, when I say a house, we're talking about like a mud house. Yeah. We're talking about like lights and garage doors. So when we say the house, it's talking about something very, very extremely modest here, right? So she gets back in the house. She gets under the sheet. As soon as the Prophet ﷺ walks in, he sees this. Like the sheets kind of, he says, أنت التي كنت وراءي? Was that you out there? So she had no way. She couldn't get out of it, right? She says, yes, that was me. She thought that the Prophet ﷺ left his house to go and visit other women. Like one of his wives, forgive me, like one of his other wives, right? So she said, I got jealous. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he doesn't give her a hug. He doesn't say, oh, that's okay. He doesn't do that. How many of you know what he did do? Yeah, see? Sometimes I wonder what they teach at these mega conferences, like in Chicago. What do they teach there? Really, everybody's going there every year. There's so much going on. Aisha radiallahu anha says, لا هدني رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نهدة في صدري فأوجعني. She says that the Prophet ﷺ poked me with his finger to a certain degree that it kind of, hurt me a bit, if you will, right? And then he says to her, أَوَ فِيهَ تَشُكِّينَ يَا Aisha? Oh, Aisha, you have doubts about me, right? But again, this idea that we're like a robot and we're supposed to act at every turn. You're supposed to be this love and caring, and you always have to have a smile at all times. And Allah did not create us like this, which is not my way of telling you guys not to be loving. No, but what I'm saying is I think there's a superficial image that feminists are created out there about the way Prophet Muhammad was as a husband, and I think sometimes a lot of the men, they get the brunt of the stick. It's disadvantageous to them because you're taught day in and day out as to what it means to be a real man, right? Unfortunately, there's nothing, we were on the other side of this. Okay. When it comes to anger, when you as a Muslim, when you're taught about anger, what's the one hadith that constantly comes to mind? I think all of you know this one's pretty easy.
Don't get angry.
That's all you hear. It's done. Anger, brothers and sisters, there's prophetic anger and there's pathetic anger. Okay? And the difference between the two is when the Prophet ﷺ, when the man came to him and says, "Awsini ya Rasulullah, O Messenger of Allah, give me wasiyah," right? He says, "La taqub, la taqub, la taqub." He tells him 3 times, don't get angry, don't get angry, don't get angry. Okay. Now does this mean you are to never get angry? And if you do get angry, then you're not following in the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ? When you see your kids watching haram on TV, when you see your wife watching TV for 4 or 5 hours and she's stuck on Bollywood and Hollywood and from one thing to the other and she's going to sleep at 2 and doesn't wake up for Fajr, you're just supposed to sit there and smile and be that amazing, loving husband? Is that what you're supposed to do? I'm sure none of your women are doing that. I'm just saying as an example, right? The Prophet ﷺ says, that is true. Here, the pathetic anger is that you get angry for pathetic things. So, for example, when your wife cooks, is that okay to say? When you cook? Mind safe hands? Because I know today men are the ones who are supposed to. Women are working, men are cooking. Men are the world's most amazing chefs, you know. Yeah, what an appeal. Get me in the kitchen, right? No, I'm not cooking. I ain't cooking. I'm not leaving at 6 and coming home at 6 and getting in the kitchen. Wallahi, I'm not doing it. And you shouldn't either. You do it, that's your prerogative. But for what? Talking about, oh, men. You know, this one sister was so desperate one time. And it's been 3 years and I'm still waiting for an evidence. I said, sister, where do you find in the sunnah that the Prophet cooked? Oh, she said he was an amazing cook. It's been 3 years, I still have yet to get a report. There's nowhere in the sunnah where the Prophet cooked. He would walk in, he would say, "Hal min ta'am ya Aisha?" Oh, Aisha, is there food? If she said no, he would say, "Inni sa'im." Yeah. So what is the anger that the Prophet is talking about? When your wife brings you the food and maybe it's too salty, maybe it's her first time, maybe it's cold, maybe it's hot, and you throw a fuss, and you're ready to divorce her, and you're ready to let her go, or you're watching your favorite soccer match, and someone walks, and she walks by. You're ready to divorce her and send her home with the kids. That's pathetic anger. This is where you have to really grow up as a man. Forgive me. This is silly and immature of you as a man, if this is really what's happening now. Or, you're playing your video games. You got some guys like this. If she's calling you once, twice, then. This is the anger. Or if someone cuts you off, you have your wife and your kids. And you're like, I'm going to show them what I made of. And you're swerving in and out of traffic. This is the anger that the Prophet is talking about. Or you get angry over silly, mundane things. Because something arrived late the following day. Your order already went. Or someone made your coffee. They forgot the extra shot. It's done. You're calling corporate. You're going to boycott them. You're not. This is the anger that the Prophet is talking about. It's the pathetic, mundane things in life that don't warrant this kind of attention, right? Now, the prophetic anger is when you get angry for the sake of Allah. And this is something that the younger generation is completely oblivious of. Because the only thing that they've been taught is to never get angry. He sees the munkar in his house, he never gets angry. He sees his wife dressed in the way she is, leaving with perfume, tight jeans. Oh, I have to follow the prophetic way. I should never get angry. I should smile. Who am I to judge her, right? You're looking at the haram on TV that your kids are watching. Who am I to judge them? The Prophet said never get angry. No. This is not what's meant by this hadith. But our problem is that we failed to clarify and we failed to make the distinction and the difference between the two. There's a prophetic anger and there's also the pathetic anger. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, I think all of you know Musa. Musa ﷺ. When he came back, he had the tablets of the Torah in his hand. Out of anger and frustration for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what did he do with the tablets? He threw them on the ground, causing them to break. وَأَلْقَى الْأَلْوَاحَ وَأَخَذَ بِرَأْسِ أَخِيهِ يَجُرُّهُ إِلَيْهِ. Right? Musa alayhi salam, does Allah reprimand him for that? No. Because that anger is justified. Why is it justified? Because it's for the sake of Allah. Listen here. If you get angry for everything in this world, but you never find it within you to get angry for the sake of Allah, I ask you to revisit your heart. Don't let somebody tell you that, because today we're living in a time where your wife is ready to send you to a therapist because you got angry. And you said, I had enough of this. This is haram, this is stopping today. Just as an example, right? It's okay to do that. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean you're psychotic. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean that you need a therapy session. It's okay to do that. You know what's funny? These kuffar, when it comes to their LGBT rallies, they are angry as hell. And everybody is, yay! Everybody's applauding them. Everybody's, promoting them. It's okay. Why? When it comes to a social justice cause, people understand. It's warranted, it's justified, it's understandable. However, when it comes to you, as a Muslim, that you get angry for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially when you're a person who has authority in your house, a man with the wife, or a man with your kids, or whatever the case may be, you have to get angry. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, even in his khutbahs, because today, we are ready to leave a masjid and to never come back. Why? Because an uncle came to me and told me that my pants were too tight. Brother, how come you don't come back to the masjid? Yeah, that uncle, that one who sits in the corner, who's been sitting there for the past 20 years. He saw me wearing tight pants one day and he said, yeah, I don't want to see your underwear. Please wear something respectful. So that young man decides to never come back to the masjid again. The sister, she wears something that's inappropriate while coming to the masjid. The auntie makes a remark and says, sister, this is not appropriate, or sister, you're wearing perfume, you should not be wearing this, right? The sister decides she's never coming back to the masjid. Why? Because everybody's suddenly judgmental now. Everybody's judgmental, and everybody's looking for your faults, and look, this was wrong now. Listen here. The Prophet ﷺ, when he would get on top of the minbar, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum would say, إذا خطب فينا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على صوته واحمرت وجنتاه وعلى صوته وكأنه منذر جيش يقول صبحكم ومساء. The Prophet, when he would get on top of the minbar, his cheeks, face would get red. وعلى صوته, his voice would become high. He would become loud, boisterous. It's as if he is a leader or a general of an army warning his people of an imminent threat that is getting ready to befall his people. Do you all think that the Prophet ﷺ was on the minbar and simply talking to them about paradise and how nice we should be? No. Okay. Again, why do I say this? Because people, Shaitan gets to them. Did you see how aggressive he was? You don't want to go back to that mission. He made you feel uncomfortable. Yeah, he lacks so much wisdom, he doesn't know how to get out. Shaitan gets you to never come back, to never seek benefit, and to never seek the ilm or the khayr that person has. And Shaitan convinces you. But here's the thing though, here's how you know Shaitan is playing you for a dummy. Now this young man, if he got kicked out of the gym, someone harassed him, spit on him, broke his nose, you know what that young man is going to do? He's going to come back the next day with a fake ID. He's going to come back from a different exit. He's going to have his friends go around the building, open up the door for him, and go in. Same thing goes for the club. If you're kicked out of the club, you're going dancing and you're going macking with chicks and getting, right? Y'all stick in here? No? That's the language I love to use. Like back in high school, my high school days, that's what we call the spitting game. I just know what it's called. It's called spitting game. No, I need to come back to this club. This is my place. Everybody knows me here. So if he's kicked out, he's going to find a way to come back to that club. Do you know why? The heart is attached to that. And this is why when your heart is into something, it will find each and every way to get to that thing. When your heart is not into something, it will find each and every excuse to keep itself distant from that thing. Take it as a general rule of thumb. If your heart is into something, if your heart was truly in the masjid, you will make it a point and find it a way to come back to the masjid the following day or in a few days. When your heart is not into the masjid, and shaitan has a grip on you, you're going to find each and every excuse why you shouldn't come back to the masjid. Okay? So that's all I wanted to say when it comes to anger. Now, anger in itself, is it a bad quality? Is it absolutely a bad quality? Or dependent on what it is? Because if we were to say that anger absolutely, in the absolute sense, is bad, how can we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gets angry on Judgment Day? We can't. Because on Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will get angry. In the Hadith Qudusi, the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah will get angry and He will never get angry like. So, Sifatul Ghadab, Al-Maghdubi alayhi. Al-Maghdubi alayhi. Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala get angry? So we can't say that anger independently in the absolute sense is a bad thing. Does that make sense? Okay, now the problem, I got two more segments, inshallah, and I'm sure a lot of you have questions and comments and stuff like that, so maybe 10 minutes and we should be done, inshallah ta'ala. Now the Prophet ﷺ, how he dealt with the non-Muslims or how he dealt with the kuffar. And by the way, this is a whole separate subject on its own. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he dealt with the disbelievers very, very different. He dealt with the disbelievers, with the Yahud, very, very different, right? He didn't treat them all alike, right? How many of you are familiar with Rachel Corey, I believe her name is, right? Yeah. She's Wallahi.
Yeah.
Ajib.
Yeah, she led it.
Am I going to say rahimahullah? No. I can't do that. Am I going to say rahimahullah? For what? Why? This is a valid option. That's a valid option. You can be proactive by simply remaining silent. But are you telling me that me as a Muslim, I'm going to feel what I feel towards, that my feelings towards Rachel Corey are going to be like my feelings towards, for example, George Bush? No. They're both non-Muslims from the appearance, from what we see apparently, they're both non-Muslims. But I'm not going to feel towards Rachel Corey and feel towards George Bush. I can't look at them the same. I just can't. I will sympathize with her in a heartbeat, but I can't sympathize with him in a heartbeat. Does that make sense? Now the Prophet ﷺ also, there was a group, and they weren't Muslim, they were not Muslim. They were simply neutral, like Al-Nur ibn Adi, right? He wasn't a Muslim. But Al-Nur ibn Adi was the one who gave the Prophet ﷺ, who granted him asylum when he was coming back from Ta'if. On his way back into Mecca, no one allowed him back into Mecca. The only person who granted him asylum was Al-Nur ibn Adi. Right? So much so that Al-Nur ibn Adi commanded his kids to get ready because battle might happen. Fighting might take place, so he commanded them for his kids to put their armor on. Perhaps there might be fighting because they're given the granted asylum to who? To the Prophet ﷺ. Now the Prophet ﷺ, when Ghazwat Badr came around, the Muslims had, for the first time, they had 70 captives. The Prophet ﷺ stood up and he said, if Al-Mut'am ibn Adi were alive today, I would have gladly given him back these 70 captives. Very different than how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with Abi Jahl and so on and so forth. And the same thing goes with his uncle. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, did he love or hate Abu Talib, his uncle? He loved him. So it's okay, I'm not trying to treat you guys. He loved his uncle. But did he love him because he was his uncle and he was his flesh and blood, or did he love him because he was an idol worshiper? He loved him because he was his flesh and blood. Right? The Prophet ﷺ was robed, he was making prayer at the Kaaba when they saw Allah alayhi wa sallam, right? Abu Jahl, Utbah, Ibn Abi Mu'ayyid, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, the elite of Quraysh, the elite pagans, they were sitting together having fun. One of them commanded Al-Nur ibn Adi to they go in to take the entrails of an animal and to throw it on the back of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he got done, he says, Allahumma alayka bi Quraysh, and he repeats this 3 times. He says, Allahumma alayka bi Quraysh, Allahumma alayka bi Quraysh, Allahumma alayka bi Quraysh. He says it 3 times. After that, he names those sitting around the Kaaba one by one. He names Abu Jahl, Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, Shaykh ibn Rabi'ah, Al-Walid ibn Rabi'ah, Uqbah ibn Abi Mu'ayyid, Abu Jahl. He mentions about 5 to 6 people, name by name by name by name by name. Now, did the Prophet ﷺ, you would think that the Prophet would raise up, and what would he do? What would you think, what would you expect him to do? If you didn't know this story, and I told you the Prophet ﷺ, if you didn't know the story, and I said that the Prophet got up and he made dua, what would you think he would say? You would expect for him to say the same thing that he said when he was coming back from Al-Ta'if. When he was coming back from Al-Ta'if and the angel asked him, what did he tell him? Come on, you guys know this, I'm sure. يا محمد إذا شئت لأطبقت عليهم. Huh? The Prophet ﷺ was coming back from Al-Ta'if during his lowest moments in Da'wah. Jibreel comes to him after being kicked out from Al-Ta'if and on his way back to Mecca. Jibreel ﷺ shows up, like he literally covered the horizons, right? He said, "Oh Muhammad, if you so wish, I will destroy the 2 mountains for them to crumble and destroy the people of Ta'if." What does the Prophet ﷺ do? He says no. Perhaps one of them will come out later and they will become Muslim and they will bear witness to your unity, to the unity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So you have one scenario that's different than the scenario of the Kaaba. Right? And that's why, brothers and sisters, let me just open up a quick parenthesis. What's the definition of wisdom? Is wisdom being nice? Is that the definition of wisdom? No. Is the definition of wisdom smiling all the time? Is that the definition of wisdom? No. Is the definition of wisdom being passive all the time? No. You know what's the definition of wisdom? The definition of wisdom is knowing when to be passive, when to be aggressive, and when to be assertive. That's the definition of wisdom. Because Allah says, "Ud'u ila sabili rabbika with what? Bil-rifq, bil-lin? Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil-hikmah." And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, when he came to Umar ibn al-Khattab, I'm sure you guys know this story, right? How did Umar ibn al-Khattab, how did he accept Islam? The Prophet ﷺ saw Umar ibn al-Khattab. He grabbed him and he says, أَمَا حَانَ لَكَ أَن تُسْلِمَ يَا ابْنَ الْخَطَّابِ. Wait, question. Why would the Prophet ﷺ grab him that way? Some people have tough skin. They're very tough. Umar ibn al-Khattab, and this is a compliment for him, was one of those people. You know when you're constantly talking to your congregation about Allah's love and mercy, there are certain people in that audience that need to hear expediently, urgently, something about Allah's wrath and punishment. That if they continue in their rebellion, something bad is really going to happen. That's the only thing that is going to enter and penetrate the recess of the inner recess of this person's heart or of the few people that you have. Not everybody is moved by Allah's love and mercy. Some people are moved by other things. This is the point that we have to understand as Muslims. So, going back to Abu Jahl, right? He also made dua when the Sab'in of the Qur'an, the Prophet ﷺ, some of the Qabail, the Quran, Usayya, in Bani Lahyan. These tribes, they came to the Prophet ﷺ. They said, "Oh, send some of your people, of your knowledgeable companions, send them with us to teach us about Islam." They acted as though they were interested in Islam. One of them, in Bani Amr, ended up killing 70 of the companions. The Prophet ﷺ stayed for a full consecutive month making dua upon these people. Now, to the opposite extreme, the Prophet ﷺ, he made dua for Qabila Daws. He says, "Allahumma hadi Daws." What did he do? The Qabila of Abu Umaydah. Oh Allah, guide Daws and bring them forward. Question for you all: is it okay for us to make dua for Muslims, for non-Muslims? I'm not trying to trick you guys.
It depends.
Like, is it okay for you to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give your neighbor who's a non-Muslim, for Allah to give your neighbor good health? Is that permissible? Because some people, they study like a book of Wala al-Mara and Aqidah, suddenly it's like, oh, they're all the same, just them. Now, things don't work like that. You can make dua for your non-Muslim neighbor, for Allah to give them good health, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help them in their worldly endeavors, for Allah to help them become Muslim. All that's permissible. But the one thing that you don't do is you don't say rest in peace, you don't say rest in pain, you don't say none of that. But his justice. I'll maybe end with this, inshallah ta'ala. Forgive me. But the last thing that I would like to engage you all in is the Prophet Justice sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There's one hadith where the Prophet alayhi, it's a sahih hadith by the way, where the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was sitting in his home. He realizes later on that someone is peeking through a hole of, you could say maybe of the door, there's a crevice, a small crack. He sees someone peeking in his house. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says something to him very, very powerful. He says, لو أعلم أنك تنظر لفقدت عينيك إنما جعل الاستئذان للبصر. The Prophet ﷺ said, again going back to the concept of justice, he says, had I known that you are looking at me through that hole, I would have taken my comb and gouged your eye with it. That's because this person is looking into something that doesn't concern him. The scholars and a lot of the Jumhur al-Ulama, they say that if you do that, there's nothing on you. Now, I'm not recommending anybody do this. But the Jamahir al-Fuqaha, they say that if someone does this to you, and you gouge their eye out, la shay'an. Some of you are like, this is not the Islam I grew up with. What's going on? Well, again, that's the problem. That's the problem, is you have one picture, you have one piece of the puzzle, and you have 20 other pieces missing. But you're convinced that the puzzle is complete, right? So there is a place for justice. There is a place to be firm. And that's why I think we've been selling to people that the Prophet ﷺ was a pacifist. He was not. The Prophet ﷺ was a realist. He was not a pacifist. By the way, I forgot to mention something about wisdom earlier. Wisdom, it's not a constant, it's a variable. Wisdom is not a constant, it's not something that does not change. It is something that is variable and it changes depending on the place, depending on the time, depending on the scenario, depending on the number of encounters, right? There's so many factors that have to be, like go back to Umar ibn Khattab, the Prophet ﷺ doesn't pat him on the back and say, you, Umar ibn Khattab, you would be an amazing contribution to this religion. When are you going to accept Islam? He does none of that. You know why? Because Umar ibn Khattab, his personality is strong. So he dealt with him in a matter that befits Umar. That's wisdom. That's it. One last thing, inshallah ta'ala, I promise this is the last one, is the qisah of Ka'b ibn Malik. We Muslims in America, obviously, we have no way of iqamatul hudud. Okay? We have no way of establishing the hudud punishment. We have no way of doing it, right? And I'm not calling for anybody to do that. But there has to be something where we deter Muslims from acting foolish, especially out in public. Because what happens on YouTube, what happens out in public, what happens on Facebook, what happens on social media, in general, it affects negatively the younger generation. That's why your son wants to be the new YouTuber. Doing what? Doing pranks and being absolutely pathetic. What does he do? He does pranks for a living. Wow. Your son does what again? He's a prankster. He puts on makeup. Yeah, he's a prankster. Maybe I can ask you guys too. Is there shaming in Islam? Is there shaming in Islam? Because I hear everywhere we shouldn't shame people. How many of you believe there is something called shaming in Islam? MashaAllah, I'm in the right crowd. I like that. I feel like I'm in great hands. Give me an example. Like what comes to mind? Aren't the hudud a form of shaming someone? Like when someone has their hands cut for stealing, and of course they went to the tribunal, they went to the court, everything is, they're simply stealing, not because they need it, not because we're talking about kind of right? There's no shubha, no discrepancy, this person, right? Isn't that person going to be shamed for life? Yeah. The Mar'a, right? When you bring someone in the middle of the court, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Nur, He says, وَلَا تَأْخُذْكُمْ بِهِمَا رَأْفَةٌ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. And do not show them that when the hudud is established upon the person who committed zina or adultery, that you are not to show them any kind of pity. No forgiving, no mercy. This is the deen of Allah. Because again, part of Islam is justice. Now here's where people really get it. You know when you make a racist comment today, which I'm not endorsing by the way, people are ready to shame the hell out of you. By the way, hell is a bad place to be in, it's not a bad word. Jahannam is a bad place to be in, it's not a bad word. Okay? I still love that word, the people of Jannah, I mean, people suddenly, when it comes to a social justice issue, oh, those Muslims who never believed in shaming, all of a sudden, they now do believe in shaming. They want to know where you're working, who you're working for. They want to call your boss. They want to make sure you never make that racist comment again. They want to make sure you lose your job. They're going to shame you. They're going to throw you under the bus. They're going to share what you said. But aren't these the same Muslims who told us, no, shaming, we should never shame people? Because if you were to ask me, shaming is an effective tool to keep people in check. Shaming is an effective tool of keeping certain people in check. That's why Muslims seem to have lost their mind, all mind. Sisters more than the brothers. A lot of the sisters, they lost their minds when it comes to what they're doing online. Shame is the only thing that, I know this is going to sound odd, and I know this is not your typical khutbah lecture or your typical lecture, right? The only thing that we have to deter people from acting foolish online or out in the public sphere, the only thing that we have left is shame. Where, who, and why, that's a secondary issue. Do you know what? When you see someone in the courtyard and that's being done to them, do you know what that's supposed to do to you? It's the last thing that happens. It's supposed to be an ibrah for you. I'm never going to do that. That's what it's supposed to do. And that's what it does do. Is that you see what's happening to them, and you say, oh, but I'm never going to try to get in close, remotely get close to them. How many of you know of the three who stayed back in Ghazwat Tabuk? 1 out of 100. What's their names? Do you know their names? Come on, try. Abu Dhar? No, he wasn't. No worries. So there were 3 companions who stayed back in Ghazwat Tabuk. Okay. There was a companion by the name of Ka'b ibn Malik, Marara ibn Rabi'a, and Hulad ibn Umayyah. These were 3 companions who stayed back in Ghazwat Tabuk. They did not have a valid excuse for staying back. They were not poor. They did not have any health challenges. They were equipped and ready to go, but they just did not go. When they came back, the munafiqun came to the Prophet ﷺ, each was given their excuse. These 3 did not have an excuse. And they came to the messenger, and they did not offer a bogus excuse. How can they? They're the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, right? God did not. Along with the other 3. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded His messenger for the community to ostracize them, to excommunicate them, to stay away from them for a consecutive 50 days. Nobody talks to Hilal ibn Rabi'a. No one talks to Marara ibn Rabi'a, and no one talks to Ka'b ibn Malik. And the companions were firm that some of them would go and talk to them, and they would say, I can't talk to you. The messenger told me not to talk to you. Is it's tough, isn't it? It's very different than the Islam. The brother looked at me, and so I'm never coming back to that masjid again. Very, very different than that, isn't it? Very. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, what are we rating? Like a bunch of snowflakes? I mean, yeah, come on. We have to tie our belts, tie our shoes. We're too we're too soft. We're too soft. This is killing our young, especially our young men. Anyways. No one. It got to the point where his wife, he could not even approach his wife. It's not enough that the community doesn't speak to him. His wife now has to separate herself from him. The wives have to separate themselves from their own husbands. For 50 days. The fitna was so strong, ya jama'at al-khair, that an emperor sent a letter to Ka'b ibn Malik saying, we saw that your companion, they were alluded to Prophet Muhammad, he has abandoned you. If you would so like, you come to, I think it was the Roman emperor, he said, if you so wish, you can come to our kingdom, and we will honor you, and we will give you a lofty position, etc. Are you guys telling me this is not fitna? Was this not a fitna for him? And then you come and tell me, brother, don't talk about hijab on the minbar. You're going to scare my daughter away. What is the world revolve around our daughter? Forgive me. You don't want me to talk about hijab on Friday because your daughter might feel like I'm being judgmental and she's not going to feel like it's not rubbing her the right way and she's going to be adamant not to come back to the masjid. Or another brother tells you, we should never talk about hijab, now is not the time. A girl grows up seeing her grandmother wearing the hijab, her mother wearing the hijab, her auntie wearing the hijab, everybody's wearing the hijab. But it's not a hikmah for us to talk about hijab and these conditions on the minbar. What is that new to us? Is it the nuts, the bolts that we lost? Did we lose one of the two? Did we lose both of them? This is not fitna. This is you need to get your act together and acknowledge that what you're doing is wrong and ask Allah to guide you. That's it. Oh, I'm never going back to that masjid. Why, sister? Well, he talked about hijab one time and you made me feel very uncomfortable. Yeah, you're supposed to feel uncomfortable. That anxiety is supposed to push you to put the hijab on. That's what that anxiety, what you feel, that's what's supposed to push you. It's supposed to be the impetus that pushes you forward. Now imagine Ka'b ibn Malik could have easily said, you know what? Is it not embarrassing that the whole community knows that you stayed behind and everybody is to stay away from you and abandon you? Is this not difficult to go through? Is it not easy for a person to slip up and say, you know what? I don't know how I can face the people in the community after this. This person is giving him incentive after incentive after incentive to abandon the Muslim community when he is at his all-time low, but he still remains firm. We don't want the fitna. We don't want anybody to rub us the wrong way. We just want people to tell us about Allah's love and mercy and how the Prophet was so forgiving and how the harlot went and she freed. This is all we want to hear. Anything other than that, oh brother, you're being aggressive. You're pushing people away from the masjid. You're judgmental. You lack wisdom. Your voice is a little bit maybe too harsh. And, that's not really the right way to go about it. We're part of the problem. And the more we silence ourselves on the minbar, the more difficult it becomes for us to drag those who are so far from the shore, to drag them back in. Our ummah, especially the younger generation, because of the selectivity that's been going on in American da'wah for the past 10 to 20 years, we've been so selective that a lot of our young youth have such a narrow, skewed idea of what Islam is and what it's not. They're so far away from the coast, to drag them back in is so difficult. Because they no longer see the coast. They just see themselves in the middle of the water. You don't know how to bring them back in because they're so far in. The point I'm trying to get at is, if we're going to continue being selective in America with our da'wah, the more lost the youth and the more difficult it is going to be for us to drag them back in. You know what gives me about a lot of some of our mashayikh du'at or whatever, they'll say, brother, now is not the time. Okay, so you remain silent on the hijab for 20 years. What do you suddenly wake up one day and say, you know what, dear community, I've been working on you for 20 years. Now I feel like all of you are spiritually developed and all of you are spiritually nourished and you are ready to hear what the true conditions of hijab are. Here they are. What do you sweat? Afwan. I notice all this just because I kind of do this for a living. I see this. A brother in Ohio, he gave a khutbah about hijab. The lady on the board, she had fit. She lost her nuts and bolts. Oh, who's this person? Next time, before we have someone talk, give us a talk, we have to know who he is, what his background is, the name, the topic, and what he. Why? What's so special about you? Forgive me, what's special about you? What you saw tonight is someone who's passionate about what he does. And if I was angry, it's called prophetic anger. It wasn't the pathetic anger. Going back to the story of Ka'b ibn Malik, brothers and sisters, he was one of the Sahaba. It was very difficult for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finally declared the tawbah on 3 of these companions. The point that I wanted to get here, brothers and sisters, is I think we have flown in the wrong direction for far too long. I think we've become so used to the whole bubbly approach, to nice, to this, to walk into the masjid and leave the same way you walk. No, we want to change. We have to support each other. We have to accept criticism from one another. It's okay. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. None of us are perfect. Where I fall short, you come and pick me up. And where you fall short, I'll come and pick you up as well. It's not about someone judging you. It's not about that. Maybe I'll end with this one example. A lot of people, when you come and talk to them about the deen or you give them nasiha, they say, brother, who are you to judge me? If you see your friend getting into the car, and they start driving towards a place, and you know at the end of that road there's a cliff, are you going to get in the car and say, look, who am I to judge you? Are you going to get in that car and say, look, I'm here to support you. Whatever you do, I'm your friend. We're boys. Little homie. This is how we do it. You feel me? Is that what you're going to say? Are you going to get in the car and say, oh, I think, look, you and I are one. We're doing this together. We find out the cliff together. Is this what you're going to do? Or you're going to yank your friend out of the car and say, get your mind straight. Are you crazy? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? I know you're not going to get in the car. You're not getting in that car. So we have to stop acting as though people who give us nasiha are those who are looking for our cause. Because this is what we reduce people down to. Oh, religious people, they're self-righteous, they're looking for the faults of everybody in their mouth. Where do people get this from? Right? Anyways, if I said anything that was correct, it's from Allah alone. If I said anything that was incorrect, it's from me, myself, and Shaitan. Jazakumullah khair for being so attentive and so gracious and so respectful of my talk. I'm really surprised that none of you are asleep as of yet. And like I said, when you see someone who's passionate, it's okay. Everybody's passionate about something. The LGBTQ, they're passionate about what they're doing. The gamblers, they're passionate about what they're doing. The anglers, the fishermen, they're yelling for their rights. And everybody's passionate about something. I just hope that we're passionate about our deen more than everything else, and that our deen is primary and everything else is secondary. Right? Any comments quickly? Any explanations? Any quick questions? Okay. Yes. Sure.
Assalamu alaikum. I really enjoyed your lecture, and your lecture is loaded. There's a lot of things that you addressed, right? In a nutshell, right? Can you tell us what are the couple of 4 steps we should take here, right? Just to put your lecture into practice. Not the big stuff, small stuff.
Very good. I think home is the better. I think home is the first school. I think what happens at home, that's where the fireworks really is our home. And I constantly I make mention of the man of the house because I think there's a huge I don't want people thinking I have a problem with women. No. But I think what's happening is that there's a push to emasculate the men, and to turn women into men, and to turn men into the women. Right? People are trying their darndest, their hardest, to simply eradicate that authority that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the men over the women. So this is why I try at each and every turn to try to remind the men that you're going to be asked about your wife is not going to be asked about you. So that's why it is our job as men to make sure that our wives, first and foremost, are not watching that which is hot on TV. That your daughters are not watching that which is hot. That you're engaged with your kids. That you should know what your daughter's profile is like on social media. What your son's profile is on social media. Who is he talking to on WhatsApp? Who are his friends? What's going on at home? Right? Is the Prophet ﷺ, when you're walking your home right now, would you change anything in it? So a lot of things, I think, brother, what happens is, it's not because people are bad, it's not because they're evil. I think oftentimes we get carried away and it becomes a norm until someone comes along and says, there's nothing normal about watching that show. I'm just saying this as an example, right? So a lot of people will say, the only thing that I remember as being wholesome on television in America was Little House on the Prairie. That's the only thing I can say was wholesome. You guys know what Little House on the Prairie is? Like, that's the show. You have the man of the house, he's 100% man. Real talk. The mother, she's feminine, she's beautiful in the sense of she's feminine, she's feminine. She's feminine, very feminine. And that is so appealing to men. That's what a lot of women don't get. Femininity is the most beautiful quality in a woman. Society is teaching them otherwise. Right? Forgive me, I'm always tempted to kind of go back there, right? But I think, brother, what I'm getting at is, I don't think now is the time for us men to throw in the towel, for us to sideline ourselves and say, oh no, women today, they got it all figured out. The reason why Allah placed men in authority is because women generally speaking, need a man's guidance. You're there to kind of help her, to kind of help guide, and so on and so forth. Doesn't mean that women can't do it on their own. But you as the husband, you're going to be asked about her, she's not going to be asked about you. Right? And I think also, brothers and sisters, is we have to lead by example. I think we have to lead, and it's very obvious, I don't think this is new for anybody, but I have to lead by example. Right? So for example, you hear about certain situations in homes where the father is an utter jerk, he's disrespectful, he doesn't honor the mother. The mother is a stay-at-home mother, she's doing everything she can, but the man is an utter jerk. The kids are going to see that, they're going to feed off of that. The kids, when they feed off of that, they're going to resent the father for that later on when they grow up. And when you are in the most vulnerable stage of your life, instead of having your kids around you, looking forward to come and visit you, to nurture you, to take care of you, to tend for you, they're going to resent you so much that they're not even going to be around. When you need them in the most important, pivotal stage of your life is when you're old and you're vulnerable. Right? I'm not suggesting anything here. This is just something common that I hear. Is that the woman is doing her part, she's a stay-at-home mom, she's taking care of the kid, and the husband is just a total nut. Right? The more you show that love to your wife, kids feed off of that. When they see the mom and the father on the same page, kids feed off of that. They feed off of that. They love you and they love the mother. They start to love them and honor them and respect them the same. I don't know why I went into that. I hope that Are you married? You're not married? My vision is not bad. We're very handsome man, Michelle. The sisters didn't suggest you wear your quality. The equality, because they say that, like you're a figure too, you know. Men have to wear hijab too. I mean sarcastic. It's just the garbage that I hear.
You know, a thought I had is a lot of the men are scared.
A lot of the
men.
Oh, rightfully so. I know.
Because a lot of society, everything is against them. You speak, you lose your job. You discipline your kids, you lose your kids.
I get it.
I mean, to approach the situation, it's so delicate. Most of us don't even know what to do. What advice can you give?
So forgive me, are you talking about a specific, are you talking about marriage in terms of marriage or having kids, or just raising kids in the society, or what? or just in general?
I think that the best frame, at least, is probably on how they approach their kids in the societies. A lot of their fears, not only to lose their jobs, is if they speak to their children in any way, they try to discipline them, and school hears otherwise, you have an entire system against them. They will lose their kids. That's one of the biggest fears they have. Once they bring them back, it's an uphill battle.
No, I get that. I get it. Okay. I think if you go about it the right, I think this has to start from the very beginning. Very, very beginning. Meaning that you're with your kid. Obviously, I think the woman, the man have to be on the same page. Husband and wife have to be on the same page. I think religion has to be a focal point of that household, right? Like, the household has to revolve around Islam. The prayer, not watching things that are haram, the magazines, the mother has to live out Islam, the father has to live out Islam, right? These are, and of course, I think, Allah is that if you're firm, and you're supposed to pave the road at the very, very early stages of their life. You pave it from the years of 3 to 7 to 8. That's when you're paving the road. So later on, you can walk on that road, not to walk on that, no. But later on, you can walk comfortably on that road. But there has to be a time where you're paving it, right? You're doing your part. You're on them. You're reminding them constantly, whether it be about prayer, whether it be about the soul, whether it be about the God, whatever the case is, right? And they have to honor and respect you. There has to be that honor for the father. There has to be the honor for the mother. Okay? And there has to be space between the father and the kids. There has to be space between the mother and the kids. And I'm not going to lie. All these books that Muslims are reading about how to raise kids, I'm not fond of at all. Am I going to say that I read all of them? No. But I skimmed through some of them and like, yeah, this is not for me. I'm sorry. The old way works. That's the problem, is a lot of people want to reinvent the wheel when it comes to raising kids. Right? But that respect comes from an early age. Like your child, why do you have to repeat something to your child 3, 4, 5 times? If you've done your job the right way, they know that when you told them to do something, from there early on, okay, mama means business. Mama means business. You love them. You remind them of how they're amazing. This isn't it, but you complement that with being firm as well. And you get to a point in time, Akhi, it's not going to become difficult for them to listen to you. It's not going to be this fight, right? Because the fundamentals, the bedrock is kind of installed, instilled in them. It's done properly, right? I think the biggest mistake is when the man is in one avenue and the woman is in another avenue, where the mother is religious, the father is not, or the father is religious and the mother is not, right? So I think there has to be that. What I see happening is Muslims today, when it comes to specifically raising kids, I think there's this idea that, oh, they're still kids. Oh, they're still kids. I'll give you a few things maybe that I do with my kids. Like with my kids, my wife, right? And Allah bless her. An amazing woman. An amazing woman. I love her dearly. I respect her dearly. And I wouldn't change her for the world. People ask me, and I don't say this, I don't know if the camera doesn't have to be on. But people ask me, do you want to marry a second or third? Well, I said, wallahi, my wife, I don't think 3 other women can do what my first wife is doing for me. And I am forever humbled by that. I am moved by that every time I see this. So I'm not interested in a second, third, or fourth wife, right? It's not to say that my looks really, you're a bit, they're jumping all over you. It's not what I'm getting at, right? But the point that I was trying to get at is when they're done eating, I taught them long ago, every time you're done eating, you kiss your mom on the forehead, you say, Jazakallah khairan for the food. Come here. I think there's something that you forgot to do. I'm teaching them to honor their mother. Right? You have to kiss your mom on the forehead and say, Jazakallah khairan for the food. No. Your mom's not going to clean your plate. Like, we have to teach them to kind of do these things. Put your chair back, you're done. You take your glass, put it in the sink. Okay, yes, it's going to be washed, but there's something that you can still do. Okay, TV? No. You come to the masjid, there should be no reason why our children are running around with Apple phones, smartphones, and they're just sitting there for hours on end, instead of you having and making him or making her sit next to you for an hour. That's okay. You can do that. There should be nothing difficult about that if you raise them the right way. But if you're constantly in that mindset of, oh, this is Well, the woman says, yes, they grow up to be kids because all your life, you're constantly reminding them that they're just kids, they're just kids, they're just kids. 15, 16, oh, he's still a kid. Yeah, he's still a kid. You know why? Because you're reminding him and teaching him that he's still a kid. So he's going to be a kid, right? The kids, for example, my kids, when they come home from school, 15 minutes. They get to watch whatever they want on TV, 15, 20 minutes, each one gets like 15, 20 minutes, and then they have whatever they're having or whatever. But you have to be firm though. You have to have a schedule in place. And it doesn't help that the man and the woman are outside working. It doesn't help. Now, I'm not here to judge each and every one's situation because it's extremely difficult. And I know some people cannot get by unless the woman and the husband are both working. But when the woman leaves the home to work, essentially it's the man's responsibility to do that. It's not the woman's, right? But when the woman leaves the house, there's a lot at stake there when it comes to the children. A lot of times you'll find women complaining, they say, I don't work, but it's difficult keeping up with the kids. With their homework, with their meals, with their this, whatever. When the father's on the grind and he's bringing home the bacon, I said this one time, it was stop shit, what I need to be talking about here. I went to a community, they didn't really get what that meant, so I'm just clarifying that. But I think we have to revisit that whole, the career woman, and you're out from 8 to 5, and she's out from 8 to 5. You're going to compromise. The kids' is iman, their faith, their upbringing, the state, the health of their iman is going to be compromised. You're not going to convince me otherwise. I don't care if you take them to Sunday school. Listen, kids need attention. And that's the way it's been since time immemorial. That's the man who works, the man is outside. He's risking his life. He's the one hanging up backwards, putting nuts and bolts in the building on the 100th floor. It's the men who did all that. It's the women who are at home cooking. The women, they were the ones taking care of the kids and so on and so forth. Right? So if you have a way where you're financially well off, I don't see a reason why your wife should be cooked, why your wife should be out working. I'm not talking about halal or haram here, but I think there's a clear indication that the kids, they're the ones who are compromised in the middle of all this when the woman is outside working an 8 to 5. Because it's not just an 8 to 5. She has to get up at 6, get ready, and then the commute back and so on and so forth. So that's literally 10 hours that's going to waste. Right? And again, I know each situation is different. Maybe she can get a part-time job when the kids, maybe you guys don't have kids. So I understand the dynamics are different. And they're going to vary from one family to the other. Okay, you can work, but please, when we have kids, I think I want you to dedicate your... Because listen, is this not why we're here? Are we just having kids because we don't have anything to do? No. We want to get close to those kids. We want them to be ubad of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We want to raise them to be slaves of Allah, confident Muslims, contributors to society, and so on and so forth. Right? I know I kind of shifted gears a bit. Anything, I know you guys have some comments or questions. So I do want your feedback, though, honestly. Please be honest with me. I've never given this lecture before. I've been meaning to do it for a long time. What is your takeaway? Like, in other words, are some of you here thinking, I know a prophet did that. What is your intibah? How? Please be honest with me. Like,
I'll just speak for myself.
please. What's your name, by the way?
Ayman.
Ayman. من وين؟ شي وخاء شو بزاف ايش فيه بزاف ايش تقول هذا فيصل بزاف هذا بزاف this is what the Algerians say and my father's Tunisian so I'm your neighbor and my mom's American so technically I'm African American right of course I said this when I was in high school and these dudes thought I was trying to be black like I was trying to be cool or something I was black right they're like, Youssef, you're like, oh, your name's not Steve or John. I'm like, Youssef, where are you from? I'm like, oh, we're students back. I'm here, brother. I even told him. You're going to be back in, just out of curiosity.
I noticed that one of two ways. I think the community itself, not just, because I'm not from here, I'm from Oregon. I came out here just for a few days to visit some different people. But just in general, people are not aware. Because a lot of them migrate, they're not aware of the influence that their kids are holding. I see kids, they're talking about not just the video game, they're talking about things that are extremely serious, things such as magic and they think it's good. We're heading down a path that men don't understand that they're men, what their responsibilities. The idea of adolescence was added to our vocabulary, which doesn't really exist, which is infantilizing our youth. And they are living in a fantasy. And when they reach that age of 18 and now they're supposed to be independent, quote unquote, they spend so much of their life distracted. They don't know who they are or what they need to do. And now they're thrown in the middle of college of an extreme amount of fitna, and they go completely awry. And it's become so difficult. There's so many different programs that are just trying to people are saying about to try to get their kids back, to get them back centered. And I noticed this beautiful thing of start at the beginning, but once they go to that age of 14, 13, 15, their heart is not with it at all. Or they don't want to be there.
Right. Yeah.
And they will refuse to be there. And even if you force them, they will make the person who's trying to help them live.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it dismantles the few people that do want to learn. And it's this destructive cycle that we're stuck in.
But here's the thing. I think as a parent, though, when you really do your job, you do your best. If later on they become misguided, they commit apostasy, or they leave Islam, you're not biting your fingers saying, "Oh, subhanAllah, I should have, I could have, why didn't I?" So, but if you do your job, then you just say, "Qadar when you truly do your job, and they're misguided later on, you say, "This is the qadar of Allah, it's out of my hands." But if our kids are not our main priority and focus in life, subhanAllah, I don't want to say don't have kids, but yeah. Asanallah, any other? I really want your feedback because I want to make sure maybe I should go about this lecture in a different way. So if you got any input,
Sure. I think you should touch on how Muslims in America handle peer pressure. I think because our lecture is very straightforward. Right? It's very straightforward, right? It's that you want to find a balance, right? That is our Islam.
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
And if you look at this, probably you're either way from a percent in America, right? How are we going to deal with the 99% that is that we interact on a daily basis?
Yeah. Even though that's a whole separate. I was talking with brother Uthman on our way here. And again, I'm not here to blame anyone, but I think what's very, very difficult for us as Muslims is to keep our heads up high while at the same time believing that this country opened up its door for us. So we have to kind of just immerse ourselves in this culture. They accepted us for who we are. They opened the doors for us. So it's as though we're the underdog, and we just have to, but that's a bit exaggerated too, because yes, they opened up their doors for you. Yes, you want to be a productive citizen, but at the same time, my religion teaches me that I still have to walk with my head high, that I have a sense of dignity, I have a sense of izzah, that I have a sense of confidence because of who I am, because I'm a Muslim. You're not going to trample over me. I'll give you your rights, but I ask respect in return. I think there's this inferiority complex that we're constantly worried and running after the non-Muslims to show them how we're not aggressive, that we're not their enemies, that, and sometimes that goes a little bit overboard, and we allow them to trample over us, and we just kind of give in, because we just want them to approve of who we are. And I don't think that's right. Right? So I think there's a great deal of inferiority complex, and I think we have to work on it. Yeah.
Let me try and reframe what Zim was saying, or trying to say. Supposing you're already down that path, right? That your fault, right? My fault, that we didn't bring up our kids the way that they should be.
Sure.
Now you're at that age, the kids, where it's difficult really, where I think many of the community are at the moment. What's is there any modus operandi? Is there any way that you may suggest that could help families?
To amend for it,
I'm
to
sorry.
try to fix it, to try
Yeah.
to. If you're at that age, it's very difficult.
And the reason I ask this is because a number of families here are also mixed families. So either the one of the partners or spouses, yeah, is a new Muslim, or has married into a non-Muslim, has married into a non-Muslim. So that dynamic has resulted in, not being able to implement the guidance that's
Yeah, I mean, that comes with a price. I mean, it's not that it's haram, but sometimes you marry someone from the same block, the same family. They're literally your next door neighbors, and you guys don't end up getting along. I mean, cross intercultural marriages, if that's what you want to call it, they're not easy. And again, it's not about halal or haram, but they're really not easy to manage because each one is bringing their own baggage. It's a different culture, it's a different understanding, it's very, very different expectations. I'm not going to say I don't encourage it, but I think there has to be a huge deal of self-restraint, maturity, discipline that goes into that. If not, I think people shouldn't engage in that. Because it takes a lot of someone. I'll give you an example. And I think I can talk about American culture because I guess I'm American, right? So American culture is when you go with someone and you end up paying for them, they usually look at you and say, "Wow, that's pretty cool, thanks, bro." Then you go back the following day and you still bring out your wallet and you pay. They're like, "Oh, thanks, bro." Muslim reverts, right? Not all of them, but I've had this happen to me on a few occasions, right? The third day you go and you pay a coffee for them, they're like, "Oh, thanks, man, you're so generous." And you start to wonder, like, okay, are you this heavy? Like, what the? You start to wonder, like, are you taking advantage of me, or what is it? I'm missing something here. The back home, the Eastern cultures. Wallah, no, I pay, bro. Stop. No, wallahi, listen, I told you, I'm going to pay you. Right? One of the other things as well is that the Eastern cultures are very big, generally, or they were, I think, very big on the man in the house and respecting the man and honoring the husband and so on and so forth. Where today, in our modern society, it's not. Like the father is always portrayed as the idiot, the buffoon. He doesn't have it together. It's the woman who always has to be there, the guy who can show him. And you can see a lot of these messages being spewed through a lot of programs, through a lot of cartoons, through a lot of animated videos. Right? So you're going to fall into a lot of those things where in our culture, it's the women who do ABC. In our culture, it's the men who do X, Y, Z. Right? So again, I think there has to be a big deal of maturity. And it's not easy. It's not. And sometimes, let me say this, sometimes people think that, oh, you're a racist. No, it's not. It's not that I'm racist. It's not that I have a problem with your culture. It's not that. It's just, I don't see it as being the best. It's not about having a problem. It's going to be very rocky and very bumpy. And when we're dealing with today's society, where people are always looking for that quick fix, right? We're in society, we're looking for things to happen instantaneously. We always want those immediate results, right? It's the newer generation, they're not raised to be patient. Let me give this 2-3 years, I'm not going to call this switch after 6 months. Oh, I just found God, I just don't feel the way I first felt. Yeah, that's what happens when you're watching too many movies. Seriously, that's what happens when you're glued to your soap operas and your TV shows. Yeah. Because you heard that one degenerate talking about how she doesn't, it's not spicy anymore. I don't feel this way. I just lost interest. Oh, we've been married for 3 months. Allah we're يعني عصر التفاهة, like one of the scholars who would call it the عصر التفاهة, the time of patheticism. Is patheticism even a word? Is it? Maybe you can Google it.
Because
Yeah, I can coin it. Yeah. And Allah knows best, and we're all struggling. Wallahi, I'd be lying to say I don't have all this. I don't. But that's just the nature of life. It's a constant struggle. So,
So, yeah, this is different topics, if I can ask. We have heard about the Prophet's anger and, but not from this parents and child perspective. The things going on globally right now, I don't know what the Prophet do, what's happening in the world, especially in Gaza. What is your take? What we should do? We are watching everything.
yeah. You know,
In a short, if we can just say something.
yeah.
Sure.
Oh yeah, no worries. I'm with. Are we okay? I'm fine. Are you okay? Yeah. He's my wife, but I don't know. He doesn't sleep on me. If he sleeps on me, I'm hello.
Yeah, maybe we'll cover the last question.
I think it's just a long drive for him. What do we do? It's a good question. I gave a khutbah about this today at Masjid in Bothell City. There are things that you can do. There are obviously things that you simply cannot do. Right? I don't think there's anything more important for us Muslims to do than rectifying our own selves with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right now. Right? And each at his or her own level. Because I think that the wrong approach to all of this is we have to stop portraying the political process as the sacred and one and only process that is going to guarantee for us success as a ummah. I think this is so nonsensical for us to think and believe for a moment that the only way Allah is going to give this ummah victory is through the political process. The political process, brothers and sisters, it is a means. It is a way amongst other ways. It is a means amongst other means. But is it the primary, is it the fundamental bedrock that we Muslims rely on? Absolutely not. Why do I say this? There's a lot of talk by Muslim leaders who will come to you and say, brother, we have to follow the Jews. Look at how smart and intelligent they are. Look at how strong and rich their lobby is. If we can garner that same support and have the same money and have a strong and effective lobby like them, everything would change in Palestine. And I find this to be so ludicrous, so nuts, so crazy, and so beyond reason. Because our equation with Allah is different than every other nation out there. The mu'adala that we have between us and Allah and other people, it's very different. Other people, it's materialistic. For us, it's not. Okay? I'm not against the political process, but I am against those who look at the political process as the end-all and be-all. When this first happened, what did we do? Brother, get on the phone and call your state representative right now. Be a contributing member of society. Do something, brother. Send a letter. Brother, you don't even pray 5 times a day. What the hell are you talking about? Look, I'm sorry. You got me going. Allah forgive you. You don't even pray 5 times a day. Just the basics. It doesn't make you extreme when you pray 5 times a day on time. You're just basic Muslim. Ain't nothing special about you. Real talk. Ain't nothing special about you. You pray 5 times a day, that's what makes you Muslim. I'm just saying this as an example. I'm selling liquor to non-Muslims. I'm selling pork. I'm using riba. Right? We're doing haram things out in public. Our women are running around in the public sphere wearing tight leggings that are supposed to be pajamas worn at home. Have you guys ever been to these colleges? I'm sure you have. You go to college campuses and you see the lunacy that's out there. And we're doing a death dance on college campus saying, oh Allah, we're holding hands, women and boys are holding hands with one another saying, oh Allah, give victory to Palestine. What are we smoking? What is it? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, and again, the political process, if we had more money, okay, if we had more money and more leverage than AIPAC, listen, if we had more money and more leverage than AIPAC itself, but the majority of the Ummah doesn't pray, the majority of the Ummah is rebellious, the majority of the Ummah is defiant, that money is not going to benefit us a bit. It doesn't work like that. The sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala don't work like that. Right? So for example, in the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, he says, إِذَا تَبَايَعْتُمْ بِالْعِلْمِ وَأَخَذْتُمْ أَذْنَابَ الْبَقَرِ وَرَضِيتُمْ بِالزَّرْعِ وَتَرَكْتُمُ الْجِهَادَ سَلَّطَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ ظِلًّا لَا يَنزِعُهُ حَتَّى تَرْجِعُوا إِلَى دِينِكُمْ. He didn't say حَتَّى تَنْخَرِطُوا فِي السِّيَاسَةِ وَتَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُحَنَّكِينَ فِي السِّيَاسَةِ. He doesn't say that. Forgive me. Okay, we have Muslims in Congress. Do you honestly believe one believes for Allah is a she, the other one is at each and every LGBTQ rally? What is she? It's confusing for me when my daughter sees that. It's confusing for my daughter. What kind of stuff? Like, why am I so happy? Well, look at her speech. Look at what they've done. This is not about being cynical, being pessimistic. It's about realizing that. Listen, before I start to just blame the finger, maybe I'm part of the problem. Again, right, accountability, responsibility. Maybe there are things that I can change about myself, about my family, about my household. Maybe I can be a better Muslim. This is a way I can contribute, inshallah, right? So these are just, I can literally, we can go through the khutbah again if you want, but I think it's going to be a little bit too long. But I really believe, let me ask you, I want to challenge you all, right? Ever since this event started, how many of us sat our children in front of a short documentary? They're out there about the history of Palestine, the dates, right? Fall of the Ottoman Empire, how they came in, how they dissected everything, right? How in 1948, how many of us sat our children and then we quizzed them on that? If no, why not? This is not a political matter. This is a religious matter. It is a religious matter. We can front, we can lie to one another and say, oh, it's not, it's against the it is. But I think, why not set our children down and quiz them? What happened in 1948? What happened in this? What happened in that, right? I think that's important so they're aware. You have Muslims today calling Hamas terrorists. You have Muslims today, Muslim kids. My kid will come and say, Baba, is it true that, you say X, Y, Z, because our friend in school said, and things like that. Right? Anyways, maybe I'll end with this one last thing. Habibi, you want to come and give the talk? No, you. You got a lot to say, inshallah. You. You got a lot, want to come and give the talk? I was joking. Maybe I'll end this hadith, inshallah. The Prophet ﷺ, how many times have you guys went to a khutbah and heard that Imam encouraging you to do dua? How many times you heard your khatib tell you, not your khatib, I don't want Shaikh to think I'm picking on him. No, it's not that. It's not, I just say the khatib in general, right? But I think it's important for us to convey to the people that, yes, that dua, it's the weapon of the believer. But if I'm telling my congregation to make dua, but their dua is not accepted because of certain things that they're doing, doesn't it become a waste of time? Yes. So in a hadith, the Prophet says, Allah is good, he only accepts good. Right? And then he talks about a man. He says, يطيل السفر أشعث أغبر يرفع يديه إلى السماء ويقول يا رب يا رب ومطعمه حرام ومشربه حرام وملبسه حرام وغذي بالحرام فأنى يستجاب له. This is important. The Prophet ﷺ, he talks about a man And he mentions a few descriptions before the hadith, describing the situation of this man, right? The nature, right? This person is on a long journey, right? His hair is disheveled, he's dusty, he's not clean, right? And then he puts his hands up. When you're traveling, that's one of the times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies and answers your prayers, right? Yes. He says that this man comes and he puts his hands up in the air, right? He says that his food is from haram. What he drinks is haram. His clothes are haram. Meaning that they are that they are indeed haram, or that they were bought, or they were in such a way that is haram, right? He says all of these things. He says, وَغُذِّيَ بِالْحَرَامِ. This could possibly mean, غُذِّيَ means that this person who's making dua was fed with haram means. So perhaps you, as a parent, you worked at haram, and you fed your children with that haram, and now your kid wants to make dua, and Allah has not accepted. وَغُذِّيَ بِالْحَرَامِ. That's why as a man of the house, if you're not focused on making sure that you get halal rizq and income to your kids, that's not your primary focus. There's something wrong. So the Prophet ﷺ, right, as the woman, she says, نَصْبِرُ عَلَى الْجُوعِ وَلَا نَصْبِرُ عَلَى الْحَرَامِ. A righteous woman, her husband was leaving the house, and she says to him, we are patient while we are hungry, but we will not be patient if you bring us back that which is haram. Right? And I can assure you she wasn't a feminist, that's for sure. So the Prophet ﷺ, after giving these four qualities, the last thing he says, how will the prayers of this person be answered? He didn't say, فَلَا يُسْتَجَابُ لَهُ. He says, فَأَنَّ يُسْتَجَابُ لَهُ. You know how sometimes you're talking about something that's impossible and you're like, what? How can he do that? Like it's so far-fetched and it's so ludicrous and it's so outlandish. You're like, what? How can, because it's so far. So the Prophet ﷺ, right, is saying that.
I'm sorry.
You guys have that, sir?
I'm sorry.
What?
I have a file. There's a file.
Do they have a question? I'm done. Tell us. I just. So the Prophet ﷺ says, brothers and sisters, can you be honest with one another? How many times you go to a Muslim shop and they're selling cigars, tobacco, they're selling black amas, and they're selling beer and liquor? Can we be honest? Come on. Do you know whose job it is to talk about that? Us. The mashayikh, the imams, the du'at, and so on and so forth. Because that's out in the open. Even if they're selling it to the kuffar, even if they're selling it to the Muslims, it's our job to speak against that it's haram. Right? How many of us are dealing with riba? How many of us are cheating the government? You have some people, there was a Ponzi scheme in Minnesota, Muslims, Umar Fulan, Abdullah Fulan, 40 Muslims engaged in scamming the government out of, I believe, during the COVID package thing was like 47 million. I mean, listen, we're doing some crazy stuff. Really some nasty stuff. But we still find it within us to come and make dua for us. I don't know, it's beyond me, right? But yeah, it's devastating. You open up the newspaper and it's Muslim names. Abdullah Kada, Shaikh Muhammad Shaikh Abdullah Kada. This is not God. And then we say, well, so far, they hate us. I hate you too. Right? We have to stop being like the Jews, they criticize your anti-Semite. Look, I understand, you have a problem with Muslims, I can understand. I get it to a certain degree. I think the man behind had, we'll take this last question. The man behind oh, because he was raising his hands. No, the man behind you, no? Oh, yes?
He said no.
Oh, you were just saying hi? Okay.
You asked about feedback, so I just want to give some
Yes.
set not it for every person. However, I'm so glad that you spoke about that particular subject, because most of what we hear in general in the plateau is Inna Allah Ghafur Rahim. It is so good. But no one is saying Inna Allah Shadid Iqab also. And that's why we are all heading in the same direction, which is the happy path. We don't talk about Jannah and Nar. We don't talk about the others. We are like the Jews. they only have Jannah, they don't have fire. That's why they keep doing what they're doing. And I believe we're following that path as well. In fact, here in America, wherever we are, we have the stop sign, we have the lights. If you go through the red light, you get a ticket and you pay. That's a punishment.
Yeah.
That's a consequence.
Yes.
That's why people don't do it.
Yes.
If we don't pay this, then we keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's what they.
And that's why there's one ayah in the Quran that really solves this. Right? And this is what's going to keep us in check. This is what's going to keep us in that healthy state of iman. Because sometimes we get over bubbly, we get deluded, and oh, why don't you wear hijab, sister? Oh, Allah's most gracious, most merciful. Brother, you don't break out down and say, yeah, Allah's going to forgive me, brother. Did you see what happened with the harlot? She was a prostitute, but Allah still forgave. Like she's using an anomaly, right? An abnormal, an exception to justify her sins, right? But Allah in the Quran says, نَبِّ الْعِبَادِ أَنِّي أَنَا الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. Like, did we stop there? There's more to the ayah, the second half. وَنَبِّ الْعِبَادِ أَنِّي أَنَا الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ وَأَنَّ عَذَابِي هُوَ الْعَذَابُ الْأَلِيمُ. O Muhammad, convey to the people that I am the most gracious, most merciful, and that my punishment is severe. I want to leave you all with one scary hadith. This so we can all get ourselves on track. There was a Sahabi radiallahu anhu by the name of Kirkira or Kirkara. He was a man who was carrying the matah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some of us, I mean, this hit me hard. I even brought it up to my wife. Wallahi, I was like, what do you make of this? Like, it really touched me. This companion was carrying the matah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they said, O Messenger of Allah, istushhida Kirkira, Kirkira, shaheed. O Messenger of Allah, Kirkira is a shaheed, he's a martyr. We saw him, he was martyred, he was killed. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, la huwa finnar. No, he is being punished in the fire. You know why? Because he took a part of the booty of the war that he was not supposed to take, because it's the leader, the imam, who's supposed to distribute it on the muqatila. But he took something that didn't belong to him, and the Prophet ﷺ said no, because he made that one mukhalafah. When I hear this puts me in check. This makes me think twice about everything that I got going on. Like everything that I got going on. He's a Sahabi. He's not a munafiq. He is a Sahabi. If you look at the Sharh al-Hadith, Sharh al-Bukhari, he's a Sahabi. But still, the Prophet ﷺ says, no, he is being punished because of the piece of the booty of war that he took that he was not supposed to take. So you can sit here and convince yourself that, listen, as a Muslim, you're always supposed to fear. So long as there's a blazing hellfire, so long as there's hell out there, you have to believe that. I don't want to be in there, but I have to make sure that I don't do that which requires me to be in there. So long as there's hell, that means I can be in there. So long as there's Jannah, that means I can be one of its inhabitants. You have to be fearful. You have to fear. You have to be fearful of that, right? That's good. It keeps you in check. It can check, and I think that's a healthy balance. Yeah. I ask a lot of brothers that healthy balance. اللهم اغفر لنا جمعنا هذا يا حي يا قيوم اللهم وفقنا لما يرضيك اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم انصر إخواننا في فلسطين اللهم انصر إخواننا في فلسطين اللهم يا رب أنزل عليهم سكينتك اللهم فرحهم اللهم أيدهم بنصرك اللهم انصرهم على عدوهم وعدوك اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم اللهم يا رب انزل السكينة والفرحة والسرور على قلوبهم يا رب فرحهم يا رب فرحهم هذا والله أدرى وأعلم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت جزاكم الله خير. May Allah reward you all. Keep me in your dua.